Welcome back again to another episode of the Empowerful Health Podcast. I'm the host, Dr. Jeremy Kerrigan, and today I have a returning guest, but this time you get to see his face. He was on 2 podcast episodes before, audio only. Welcome, Stephen Merrell.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Remind the audience what you do,
Not a problem.
who you are.
So I'm a family doc, originally from Virginia, moved to Utah and completed residency training there. I practice full spectrum family medicine. Best part of life is my wife and 3 kids, and kind of on a spur thought, came down here to Arizona, spent some time with Jeremy, and it's been really good. So I really enjoy family medicine, seeing patients from the very beginning of life all the way to the very end and trying to help them navigate health and healthcare and everything in between. So
I think we said earlier, womb to tomb, right?
Exactly.
You help moms get ready to have a baby, deliver babies, and manage medications when they're old. So,
Exactly.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad to have you again. Stephen's one of my longest running friends. We met 2003 and have had a friendship ever since. It's been really great. We've gone different directions in terms of healthcare. I went to be a chiropractor. He went to be a medical doctor, and we may or may not have had some long discussions of differences in the profession. But it's great to be kind of on the same team, if you will, now.
Agreed.
And we're very both holistic in nature. Both have the philosophy of, there's time for drastic measures, and there's a time to try breathing and diet.
Amen.
And let's discern between the two and work there. So one of the, I want to highlight a little bit, I don't always get personal in the podcast, but the reason Stephen's here in the studio today is because of supporting friendships. And that's why we're here on a Sunday afternoon recording a podcast episode, because oftentimes when we're struggling, when we're overwhelmed as people will say, our friends, family will be like, let me know if you need anything, and it's well-meaning and it's much appreciated. But when you're struggling with something, mental health or otherwise, sometimes you don't know what you need. And so I had a conversation with Stephen yesterday morning, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. I'm struggling with something. And he's like, okay, here's some suggestions. And then 3 hours later, he was at my office, jumped on an airplane and drove down. And that's not feasible for everybody, to just jump on a plane and run across the country to help somebody. But that's what we're going to talk about today is a couple of layers to it, if you will. There's when to know when to ask for more information. When we know someone's struggling, how do we know if it's just life's a little overwhelming versus something more, some severe depression, maybe some suicidal ideations? What are some good questions we can ask? And then what can we do? How can we be there to support people? Oftentimes there's a lot of fear and a lot of, I shouldn't even say fear, but fear and hesitation, I don't want to do the wrong thing. If my friend's struggling, I don't want to do the wrong thing. Or we're just super busy. We've got so much stuff on our plate that we don't have time, And I like to think that if I don't have time to help somebody, I probably am doing things wrong at some point,
Yeah,
And so
said.
There's that way of looking at it. Okay, how can I make sure I'm taking care of the things that are most important? And then this weekend getting to spend together has been beneficial for both.
Agreed.
So as we look at opportunities to serve people, know that as you go in and help people, we're going to come out better. So that's a little long introduction to that. I tend to be long-winded, as you know, if you've listened to my podcast before. But let's go into questions. Let's start on the superficial level. People walk around, how are you doing today?
Most of the time it's, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
I'm doing great. And it's almost more of a greeting more than it is a true response.
Absolutely.
And I think you need to recognize that if you're using that as a true gauge for how somebody's doing emotionally, you're going to miss something.
Right.
And so it's fine to greet each other. How are you doing? It's a genuine, I think, question, but it oftentimes isn't enough to solicit from another individual how they're actually doing.
Right. Well, and sometimes I don't think we're even asking it genuinely. We're asking it a habit,
Right.
Which is fine, fine. There's that word again. But if we really want to get to know, we need to be a little more purposeful in how we ask it, And there's been times, especially when I've been overwhelmed, struggling with some depression or anxiety, someone's like, how are you doing? I'm doing good. And then in my head, I'm like, you lying? Trail off there. This is a family-friendly podcast. But that, it creates some dissonance. So, we're not necessarily serving people by just simply giving that general greeting and response, So let's chat a little bit about what are ways to ask a little bit more,
So I think part of it has to do with the nature of the relationship you have with the individual. And if you are genuinely friends to that individual, you have an awareness of what their likes are, their dislikes are. And when we chat, I can tell, I think fairly quickly in the conversation through whatever I'm saying, somewhat how you're doing.
Sure.
And then it's not being afraid to stand with somebody, even if the day has been difficult and they're having another difficult day or another difficult week or month or year. And that can be uncomfortable for a friend because, like you said, we don't always know what to do or say. And most of us, especially guys, like to fix things.
Right.
And there's not always a quick fix to emotional challenges, mental illness.
And sometimes jumping in with the fix is the wrong response. And I'm careful to say that because we just said, well, there's no wrong response, but like sometimes it is because they can't take a solution at this point. They just need someone to sit in it with them, if you will.
And I think that's the key to how you form your responses is a willingness to sit with that individual.
Sure.
In the fantastic moments of, hey, you opened up your clinic. Hey, this is a cool podcast. Hey, you are having some successes here. And I love hearing about that. But I equally, if I'm a true friend, need to be able to be willing to say, hey, this was not a fun exchange with such and such an individual, et cetera. I'm feeling overwhelmed. And it can be difficult because we, again, like to have a quick fix to whatever the problem is, or we really like to ride the wave of a positive thing to a positive thing to a positive thing, which is what makes social media so attractive, but also so damaging.
Right.
Because it makes
we assume everything's positive because that's all we're seeing.
And if we're not experiencing a positive wave to a positive wave, then we're doing something wrong or
something's wrong with us. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So
going back to that initial question, like I watched a podcast actually, and they said in there, asking the question, how are you doing? And then when they say good or fine or I'm doing, or it is what it is, all the things we throw out. And then they say, well, how are you doing? You just ask it again.
Yes.
And sometimes then they say the same responses and then you ask it again. And it's like, I'm here. I want to know. Or even just saying that, when people stop and be like, okay, I know you just said you're good. How are you really doing?
Yeah.
Like, how are you really doing? Like, I'm here. I got time. I want to listen. I want to hear. Or if you don't, there's times you're in passing, and someone's like, how are you doing? And if you're good enough friends, it's really hard to lie to a friend.
Agreed.
And if you're a good enough friend and they're like, how are you doing? And you're like,
and you can see the hesitation. You say, can I call tomorrow?
Absolutely.
And touch base. And you give it a real time. Exactly. I can call in an hour.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that over the past few months, that if you call and I can't pick up, or it's hey, I'm putting the kids to bed. Can I call you in 30 minutes? And then you call in 30 minutes and you check in on them. And it's a willingness, like you said, to sit with the individual for the good and for the bad. And what's so beautiful is this weekend has been fantastic for me as well, very much in a healing way through the challenges that I'm experiencing. And that's what a friendship is supposed to do.
Mutually beneficial, helping each other.
Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes it's all about me and sometimes it's all about you in a conversation.
Exactly.
But even those, like the things I'm learning by helping and being in it with you, also help and benefit me, and it can go both ways when we take the time to literally, like, again, sit in it with people.
Right.
And be there. And again, we don't have time, and there's times we're literally running out the door. We got 17 different kid activities, all this sort of stuff happening, but making that and saying, I can't now, I can then.
Yes. I'll say just briefly as well, these social connections that we're describing are so important for longevity of life, for protection on illnesses, et cetera. Harvard just completed an 85-year study where they showed that social connections of individuals were more predictive of positive health and positive outcomes and social successes than the health of those individuals, the health markers we classically use.
Cholesterol levels,
exactly,
blood pressure, things like this. Sure.
And it's not that those aren't important, because yes, we've seen predictions on problems, but that study highlighted that the social connections we're describing are as important, at least, if not more important, than these other markers for health. And as a family doc, I don't have a box on my physical exam for, question their social connections, which, we probably should develop something more formalized, but
it's a hard thing to quantify. You can't be like, well, you're at 76% level for your social connection, it's
exactly.
Like, what does that even mean?
Exactly.
But for some people that could be, I have one friend that's there all the time. and others that could be, I have 10 friends, but none of them are really there, So it's such a variable, but being able to have that connection, real connection, isn't we do fun things together all the time. That's
Agreed.
great. That's fun. But real connection is we do fun things. And when it's hard, we cry together. When it's
Yes.
something frustrating, we not rage together, but we, commiserate together. We are on all levels of that, the vulnerability is a key with that. I like to think a lot about, like, if you're trying to glue two things together, the smoother the surface, the harder it is for them to stick.
Agreed.
So often, when you're gluing two pieces of wood or two sheets of metal, you rough it up first.
Exactly.
You get vulnerable, and then the bond connects more. And so being able to be vulnerable with people is so hard, especially as men in a modern society, but even women, they'll put on facades as well. We all do. We put on the mask and we're like, yeah, everything's great. Everything's grand. What's that song from the Muppets?
Everything is, I was thinking of the Lego movie one.
yes.
Everything is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It's in both of those movies, it's made tongue in cheek. Like, everything's great, but not really, because life is not like your blood pressure. This is a great example. I'm giving it, and then I'm like complimenting myself. Good job, Jeremy. This is a great example. But no, like the blood pressure doesn't stay at a set even amount all day, every day.
Right.
It is supposed to vary. Our heart rate's supposed to vary. Our temperature's supposed to go up and down. Everything in our human body is designed to be variable, yet we expect our emotions to be like good all the time.
And that's actually a marker for poor health when we're doing neonatal care or pre-delivery care. When we see a heart rate that doesn't have great variability on a tracing, that's a marker for stress.
Sure.
And it can be very similar to, us as adults as well. So it's supposed to have some ups and downs and all arounds, and that can be healthy.
Well, and a good friend is there for all of it.
Yeah.
They're not just there for the highlights. I do want to go in, as we're talking about questions, is like, there's some hard questions to ask. There's everything's hard. I shouldn't say everything's hard, but life is hard in 2024 for everybody I know. I don't know if the same, but like, there's a lot of those challenges, but then there's stuff that's above that. There's severe depression. There's people that are drowning in mental health issues, and superficial questions aren't enough, And so as a medical practitioner, let's talk about a couple of those hard questions.
So let's go through that in a couple ways. First of all, if you're wanting training on what to do to be more aware and prepared for somebody who has experienced suicidal thoughts or is experiencing those, QPR is a publicly available training that you can get. It stands for question, persuade, refer.
Okay.
And it is a public version of training, some of which we receive as medical doctors and other practitioners. And it basically helps you be a little bit more comfortable with this topic. The idea is, if you can tell somebody's having a hard time, you ask a question. And it does not cause a person to think more about suicide to ask them, are you thinking about hurting yourself?
Right. Do you have a plan in place?
Exactly. Have you hurt yourself?
Right.
The other key questions besides the specific plan is, do you have access to lethal means? Do you have a firearm? Do you have medications? Do you have other things that people think about using to hurt or end their lives? And that access to lethal means is a key part of, as well, of keeping somebody safe when they get impulsive. And that's really what suicide is. When suicide is completed, it tends to ride on the wave of an impulsive time.
It's like a wave of intensity that washes over. You can't see daylight anymore.
Yes.
You can't see any hope.
Yep.
And that seems to be the logical solution, is to stop
and
feeling at all.
we learn from people who have survived their attempt that they tend to be very grateful. Most people go on to have a very good, successful, healthy life. And we've got data to show that. If you can help somebody get through that impulsive time, and that's sitting with them, that is, again, if you have a firearm, can I babysit that firearm? Sure. If you have medications, sometimes we have spouses dispense those medicines so that they are able to stay up on them, but they don't have a stockpile of multiple things that can be harmful to them.
I want to highlight a little bit of that question, because the way people answer it can tell a lot. I'm sure this training gives more, but when you say, do you have lethal means, and they immediately can tell you exactly, you know they're thinking about this. When they have to stop and be like, well, let me think about this for a second. I guess we do have that. It's a different response, you know.
Agreed.
And you can be looking at somebody, and I mean, I don't know the percentages, but it's pretty high how many people think about suicide once a year, or like in the last year, you know,
Right.
or in the last week. There's a lot of people that we're walking around with. Everything seems normal, and you'll be amazed at the shift in someone when you can actually ask a question and start kind of seeing it. Because what happens when someone's really thinking about suicide and it's stuck in their mind is there's a lot of shame that goes with it. And they're beating themselves up even more because there's...
You should be able to take care of this.
Why can't I even handle
exactly?
this? Why am I even thinking about this? I have a good life. I have X, Y, and Z. Why would I do this to family or friends? Why would... And this endless things. And so for someone to really like see them and be like, are you thinking about this?
Right. How
And
often are you thinking about this?
Absolutely.
And sometimes I like to just guess basically and say, are you thinking every day, every other day, once a week? How often? As a practitioner, and again, I've got a little more experience and training in that, but I don't think it's wrong for the masses to ask a question very direct. Are you thinking about hurting yourself?
Right.
Are you thinking about committing or dying by suicide? We generally have changed that phrase instead of committing suicide, which puts a whole lot of, again, blame and shame on the individual, to they are experiencing something that no human would want to experience.
Right.
And it's a die by suicide if the event occurs.
Sure.
So I love the idea of just being very direct and saying, are you thinking about hurting yourself? What is your thought or your plan for hurting yourself? Do you have access to that plan? And those are good, important questions. You can follow it up with the validation of, you are so important to me.
Right.
You connect with the individual. You are present in that moment with those individuals. That's part of the persuade, to start to see things maybe in a better, more positive light. And then the last is refer. The best thing to share here, if you need to refer somebody, is 988. We now finally have a national hotline. It isn't as personable potentially as you connecting with your friend,
Right.
but it is trained individuals who are paid to be able to help them at any time and all times work through that intense moment of suicidality when it comes. So it's always okay to refer them to 988. And then there's other local resources in most locations as well.
And being willing to say, can I help you find a counselor? Can we do research together?
Yes.
I like to send people to like Psychology Today, has a lot of therapists and counselors.
It's a great resource.
You can see, what are their specialties, what's their background, what's their training. You can read a little bios, get comfortable with them. But even being willing, like, can I help you find someone? Can I drive you to an appointment? Can
Agreed.
I be there,
I will
to
call
support
you
anyway?
tomorrow and check in and see how
Call together and make
Exactly.
the appointment. Because
Yes.
when you're incredibly anxious and depressed, calling on the phone and being like, hello, like I need help is asking for help is one of the hardest things most people do.
Right.
Again, particularly as men, but it's also everyone experiences this. But that there's a video that goes around on like social media that says, what's the bravest thing you've ever said? And help. To be able to say, I need that help. It makes us feel like we're failing, but that's not how we're designed to be. Like, we're not designed to be creatures that just exist in a vacuum by ourselves. Like, interconnection, like that study showed, our health is not just improved by it, it's dependent
essential
on us having those connections. And so being able to ask for help doesn't make us look weak. And if someone does, this happens. So I'm part of a group on Facebook of like 200,000 dads, that share things. And
Cool.
some of them will share and they'll be like, yeah, I tried to open up, and people are like, well, you're weak, you're this. Realizing one important thing to realize with that is those people need help.
Yeah.
People that see asking for help as a weakness have so many walls built up, so much trauma, so many mental health things of themselves, that the idea of that has been banished from them. And so recognizing that their advice is not given from a place of, I love you and I want you to be doing better. It's given from a place of, I'm so scared that someone's going to see that I'm frail.
Right.
I'm going to hide it at all costs, and you should do.
Right.
And so recognizing that they're not in a place, that's not who you want to be getting advice from.
Agreed.
And keep asking people for help. There's something called a safety plan.
Yes.
Which is, if people are experiencing suicidal ideations, what do you do? And I have an app on my phone that lists off, and you call people until someone answers. You have a list of people and you keep trying and keep asking more people, which is incredibly hard to do when that wave is over the top and you can't breathe, but is essential to helping save life and keep yourself here. Because like you said, there's people that did it, that took their own lives. Or as like they say a lot of times that, what's the way they,
died by suicide.
Yeah, your mental health kind of, they
succumbed to the illness.
Yeah, they lost the battle with
right.
this type of stuff, which is a better way of saying it than they
Agreed.
did this to themselves.
Agreed.
Like it is a battle, but they're the people that the people that aren't successful show that there is hope afterwards.
And most of them go
so
on.
Dark. You literally were doing something or about to do something or trying to do something to stop it all. And then they're able to go on and live a happy life. And so if people are right there on that cusp, know that there's hope ahead. And that's pretty much how life goes. There's always this intensity before, and sometimes that intensity can last what seems like forever, months, if not years, but there's still hope and there's still people on the other side that need that impact.
Well said. And I think learning that as a human allows you to transfer that to somebody else,
100%.
which is the part of that social connection that I think helps build longevity.
And you talk to anybody who's successfully gone through something hard and has come out on the other side and has been able to go forward, oftentimes they were inspired by somebody else, And so the path that we take in overcoming a challenge, we're going to be able to turn around and grab someone and lift them up the hill that we just climbed, kind of thing.
Agreed completely.
In such an empathetic way, There's wonderful people out there, and I'm so grateful there are people in this world that don't experience some of these challenges, because it would be not a great place if we all experience the same exact challenges. But even though there's some people that don't understand, there are so many people that do and get it.
And I think even if you don't know everything that a person's experiencing, and who knows everything that a person is experiencing,
right.
It's just so healthy to be able to say, I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. My heart goes out to you. I am, let me tell you something about my day. Tell me something else about your day.
Right.
How did this go with this individual? You ask about what questions do you ask? If you're truly wanting to know an individual and get to know them, then you're going to ask them about their life.
Yeah.
And it will be the good things, the challenging things, the in-between ones. And then you have something to lift on to say, what's happening with that podcast? What's happening with your business? What's happening with this child that had this illness, et cetera? And that builds those social connections, which again are so important.
Well, you get into topics that turn that light back on a little bit. We've all seen that in someone when, they may be a fairly monotone person, but you get on the right topic and the eyes light up and that passion starts soaring. And when you're in a dark spot, it's really hard to feel that passion. But if we can have conversations that lead to that and get on those topics and be like, what are you really passionate about? You're really passionate about gardening.
Yes.
We could do a couple-hour podcast, I'm sure, on all this stuff.
Exactly.
And you'd be animated and excited and go in that, finding those types of topics, not to avoid the hard topics, but to help them see there's other positive things going on in life and things that they can be excited about again.
And I think that's part of that persuade part. So again, question, persuade, refer. The persuade part, gets at their interest. I think it helps individuals see the impact that's positive. Even just this weekend, as we've been able to interact with others of your friends, they generally pause, turn and say, you are such a good guy, because all of us need those positive affirmations that are true.
Right.
And so much of the time we don't allow it because of our barriers and our walls and our whatever else. And so that's hopefully what you can do with an individual who's struggling. It's okay to ask them direct questions. Are you having thoughts of hurting yourself?
Sure.
Have you had those recently? Do you have somebody you're reaching out to in professional help? Can I help you find somebody professionally? There is good help and hope. Most individuals who have experienced suicidal ideation go on to have very good, happy, successful lives.
Right. Which, when you're in it, you're like, okay.
Yeah.
But
you're lying or you don't know.
Saying it over, and being able to just voice the opposites and try to give some contrast there is key. It's very helpful. So
yeah.
The next thing we want to talk about a little bit is the things to do. We're talking some of this, but I want to be a little bit more specific.
Please.
We're talking a little bit about, like, we've asked questions. What questions can we ask? And there's dozens and dozens more. The QPR,
Yep.
right?
QPR.
Is a great training. Get some information. One of the things I want to talk about too, though, is like what to do. Oftentimes we're isolated. We don't know what to do to help people. One of the things that I talked about, a few things that are important that have helped me, and everyone feels love a little differently based off their life and their upbringing. And so figuring out like how people feel loved. Sometimes that's gifts. Sometimes it's saying nice things. Sometimes it's quality time. There's 5 love languages.
Exactly.
I can't remember who wrote that book, but it's a fantastic resource. But finding those things, and spending the time and taking the moment and helping people feel that are important is important. I think other ways is like giving options. When someone just says, let me know if I can do anything for you. And you're sitting there like, if I knew what to do to get out of this situation,
yes,
I would have done it. I don't know, And so instead saying, what can I do for you? Being like, here's a couple of ideas.
So a couple ideas. I guess I'll try to just clarify the 2 things that I try never saying in situations like this is, number 1, I know how you feel, or number 2, let me know if I can help you. Or let me know how I can help you.
Right.
Because like you said, if you would have known something, you would have probably already reached out to have done that. And then I have learned over life that my life experiences are different enough that I will never say, I know exactly how you feel.
Right.
There's similarities and things that allows us to bond.
Be similar, but yeah.
Agreed. So what do you do? What do you ask or how do you what's the next step? I think it's important to, again, have already had within the friendship bonds and connections with that individual that you then start to lean on. And if a person is struggling with emotional challenges, being present with them in that moment is something to do.
Sure.
So rarely is it, I'm going to press this button or one medicine or something, and then
there's
that
a plate
person's
of cookies and suddenly you're better. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, if the plate of cookies is the genuine expression and that's all you know how to do, fantastic.
I was going to say, it depends on where you buy the cookies, but no, like the cookies can be an expression, yes, but it shouldn't be the only,
Agreed. So I think there's no wrong besides, saying, oh, I know exactly how you feel. And then you offer advice that only worked for you. Probably, again, not the right approach.
Yes.
Or just very curtly, well, let me know how I can help you.
Sure.
Those 2, I think, but anything else, it could be the plate of cookies. It could be tell me what was the most difficult part of today, and being willing to listen and hear and be present in that moment. It could be, let me tell you about something good or bad that I experienced today, and we can talk about that. It could be what's a fun hobby that you've been missing? How can I help you get back into that said hobby? If you've experienced challenges and found benefit from deep breathing, from cognitive behavioral therapy, from, medications and practitioners assisting, it's okay to share that personal experience.
Absolutely. And I often will recommend sharing it and saying, this is what worked for me. It may not work for you.
Yeah.
This was my experience. If it could help you, I'd just like to share.
Agreed.
If it doesn't, don't, because we want to make sure they don't feel pressure, because oftentimes if you've gotten to a place where you're really struggling, you've tried a lot of things.
Yeah.
Maybe you've tried them wrong. Yes. Maybe you didn't try them fully, but you've tried things and you get to the point where it's kind of hard to try new things,
Agreed.
And so being able to make it as easy as possible. Like you said, what's your old hobby? Hey, I know you used to love, Frisbee golf.
Exactly.
I've got time Friday night. Do you want to go play?
And I love the specifics because that's so important. I'm going to call you back tomorrow. I'm on my way to work. It'll be about 9:00. Does that work? Or 7 or whatever. And I think being present in the moment with that individual is as therapeutic as almost anything else, because it might be a session with a therapist that helps change. It might be the correct medication for an individual, but just knowing that when they're lifting something heavy that they don't know if they're going to ever be able to lift, to have somebody there is, and however that's expressed, I don't think is quite as important because it's so specific to the individual.
Well, and when you're dealing with some big challenge you're trying to overcome, it's never one thing that's going to fix it.
Yeah. Well
If
said.
someone's like, hey, I'm 200 pounds overweight and I need to lose weight.
It's never one thing that led to it.
I didn't just add salad to my meals and then I can lose 200 pounds. It's a whole variety of things that work together, and mental health is no different. Yes, therapy helps.
Yeah.
Yes, yoga helps. Yes, breathing can help. Yes, exercise can help. But none of those are going to fix it all by itself. And
Agreed.
None of those are going to be as successful if you're doing them alone and not having community support around you that's like, hey, did you go to yoga today?
Right.
No. Call the next day. Did you go to yoga today? No. Can I take you to yoga? Can I go with you and be there with you and support you? That's hard to do in our busy, fast-paced society. But like you said, just being present, being there. One of the things that's been on my mind a lot in my most recent mental health struggles is real friends should know what your front door looks like.
Well said.
They should, not real friends, because that's not saying, but like if people really want to be in it with you, they should know what your front door looks like.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be let me know if I can do anything for you. I'm always here for you. Those are all well meant, and no shade to anyone who said those. But if you really want to help, it's going to take a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's going to take showing up at the house, making the phone call, or like you said earlier, one thing I want to say is, hey, I'll call you tomorrow at 9. Tomorrow may get really busy. 9 may suddenly go to 9:30 or 10. It's okay to shift that, but call.
Yeah.
Hey, 10
I said
o'clock.
it exactly.
I said 9. It's not you. X, Y, and Z is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You're still important to me. And say those kinds of things.
Yes.
You're important to me. I love and care about you. I can do 10 o'clock. I will be there.
I think it's okay to say, what was the best part of the day?
Absolutely. Let's focus on something else.
Exactly. So in our conversation, sometimes it's just, what was something good that happened?
Absolutely.
And it's not hey, we're trying to trick persons or whatever, or only focus on things that are good. And then it's okay to say, what was the biggest struggle? Yeah. And then hear it for what it is, be present. And
it's okay if they don't have a best part of the day. And they're like, it was hard. And be like, some days are like that.
Exactly.
And I'm really sorry you're dealing with this.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry, but don't finish up. Let me know if there's anything I can do, offer help, offer different ideas too, hey, I can do X, Y, or Z. I can do this. I can do that, and again, well-meaning advice. That's what I want to finish maybe up today with is maybe a little good, well-meaning advice that doesn't land well, being careful what we're saying. And this is kind of going earlier I said, don't be scared, just be there. There's not a wrong way, but sometimes there is, we want to be very careful to not come across as judgmental. And we can say hard things, Someone shared an example with me that I liked. I do slightly disagree with the example, but I liked a lot of it. They said, it's like, there's a snake in the grass and you're going to go outside and you don't know there's a snake in the grass. And I know there's a snake in the grass and I'm going to warn you about it, which sounds like a great example on the surface, but the point of it was like, I love you enough to tell you what you're doing wrong and to help you see some pitfalls so that you don't fall into them, which is a really good point, and really a great way to show love. Sometimes in the moments where it's like you're in a pitfall, your mindset's not right. You need to shift this and this and this. It can come across as really judgmental and overwhelming for people. And it's not that you need to just be like, you're great the way you are, don't change anything.
Yeah.
But also you just need to let them know that you do love them the way they are.
Yeah.
You want them to be better, not because there's the right way to do it. You want them to be better because you want them to be happy,
For who they are, as they are. Exactly.
Where they're at. You want them to see progress. You want them to not be stuck in the dark clouds, and letting them know that, and saying, I'm going to give you advice. I don't know if it'll all work for you. I'm doing this because I love you and I want to see you happy again.
Yes.
I want to see the old you that used to be there and
or a new,
still
better
in there.
Yeah.
I want to see more of that. Here's what helped me. Here's what I would suggest for you, knowing you and loving you. How can I help you get to that point? What can I do? How can I be in it with you?
One thing that just a quick question that I will sometimes share with folks is, can I give a suggestion? And are you in a spot where it's okay to say something that might help and this might not? And if it doesn't, that's totally fine. Here is one suggestion,
Right.
And And I think that's a better approach than, well, your problem is that blah, 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 blah.
I know what you're feeling. When this happened to me, this is what I did. And then my anxiety was gone and I was
for the rest
cured.
of time. Exactly. Like, yeah, exactly. Which I don't think I've said to you, but
no, you have not. You have not. But I've had that said, like, oh, I fixed my anxiety with this 2 little things, and it's like, I'm so wonderful that happened for you. It's not my experience.
Right.
My experience is different. And understanding that as the person, be like, my experience was this, but theirs is different.
Yeah.
How can I listen? How can I understand? What can I look at? And what did their growing up look like?
Yeah.
What did their family relationships look like? What's happened to them that's led them to be in this spot? And the more we really truly understand people, the more we love them.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite books of all time is Ender's Game, and I've quoted this probably 6 times on my podcast already. So sorry if you've heard this before.
At some point I should probably finish reading it. I think I started it at some point. But
yeah, I get it. So there's a quote in there where he says, that to really, he's a general and he's trying to take down the enemy. He's like, the challenge is when I really finally understand my enemy, I can destroy them. But at the same moment I really understand them, I love them. Because we really get why they're doing what they're doing, And so when we're dealing with, friends, family members that are struggling, and we're all struggling to an extent, but someone's really, really struggling, try to understand them, try to see where they're coming from, what's led them to that point, instead of judging them or be like, if they just did X, Y, and Z,
Agreed.
If they just did these spiritual things, or if they just did these exercise things, or if they just ate better,
nutrition
if they just
was better,
did this,
exactly.
like they slept more, it's like all those are good. And that person most likely who's struggling knows all that and knows, I just need to do all these things. I can't.
Right.
Sometimes when people are dealing with overwhelming depression or anxiety, they can't even get out of bed.
Right.
And so to be there and to go into the room and be present with them,
right.
and to, again, sit in it with them is really helpful. And just letting them know we're here, we care, let's do this together and have that community.
I think that summarizes kind of the primary point of what to do when you feel like somebody is struggling is you reach out with a connection out of a position of genuine love and care. And if that is expressed, it's less important, I think, what exactly it is. Again, the cookies, hey, I'm going to call you, hey, let's connect, let's go to the gym together, let's whatever else. It's more important to have expressed that connection, that importance that the person has in your life. And then it will lead to, I remember you really enjoyed this book. I remember you used to do da-da-da-da-da. What is something that you're missing that we can work on bringing back into your life?
There's a couple of memories that come up. One was I remember a friend, we were talking and things were busy and we talked a lot about some of the stress they're having and something was going on with me and I was like, I can't. And they're like, at some point we're going to talk about this. And they just let me know that they care enough that they knew it wasn't now, but they wanted that conversation. And they remembered it and came up later, Another one is of you, actually, and this is one of my favorite stories. I think I even shared this on the podcast, but we were talking on the phone one day, living in different states, and like you progressively got like heavier breathing. And I'm like, what's going on? What are you doing? He's like, well, I live on the 14th floor and I didn't want to get on the elevator because I'd lose the reception. So I wanted to keep talking to you. So I'm climbing 14 flights of stairs, and yes, they would have been, you could have called me back or something like that.
Sure.
But the message, this was 12 years ago.
It's about
the message that you cared enough to climb 14 flights of stairs is still stuck with me. I don't remember anything we talked about.
Nor do I.
You probably gave me advice. I probably gave you free advice.
Agreed.
And I don't remember that, but I remember that, and this weekend's another one of those core memories of like you got on a plane and came. You were there. You showed up, and when people show up, you're going to remember that.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have the right flavor of cookies.
You don't have to have been trained in all of that. The most important thing is the living connection with the individual, and that is going to be expressed. Hopefully it's helpful to hear. Try avoid saying, I know how you feel. Try avoid saying, well, let me know how I can help. Try to come up with some specifics on, let me touch base in a couple days and see how things are. Let's talk about this, that, and the other. I'm going to share with you something that was good or bad. And just that living connection, I think, is so important.
And asking specifics, and asking.
Yes.
Like, can I give you a hug?
Right.
Can I buy you Chipotle? I know you like
Right.
Chipotle. Can I buy you some Chipotle and bring it over?
Yeah.
Can I take you, like, just asking for that? And the hug, I know we live in a world where it's, you want to be careful who you're touching, but a touch on the shoulder, touch on the arm, looking in someone's eyes, I'm going to lean forward and doing this and be like, I'm here, and not just like, I'm here, and like backing off, it was like, we have these hugs, we pat each other on the back and we move, but there's that time where you hold and you're just like, here.
Yes.
Not holding on so tight. They're like, no, let me go. But like just being present and asking that. I remember a lady was talking, and this is one of my friends that just, everything's put together. Like you look at her life and you're like, this lady's got it figured out, like on every level, and she was telling me a little bit about an overwhelming day. And I was like, I feel like you just need a hug today. And she's like, I always need a hug. And that hit me hard. We look at people and we think they got it all put together.
Exactly.
Everything's fine. I know where they live. I know what car they drive. I know what job they have. They're good, but this person be like, I always need a hug. We just don't know until we ask and say, is it okay if I do this?
Yeah.
And they can say no.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Then we offer something else, but just asking, just being present and asking. And again, if you're really concerned about someone, do some training, learn some things that'll help you better serve them and better help them. Because the vitality of this and the reason we're here, we got to go to the airport here shortly, but the reason we're here on a Sunday afternoon recording this podcast is because, not even exaggerating, but lives depend on it.
Yeah.
People's lives depend on it. And when we lose someone, and I've known quite a few people, unfortunately, in my life who've taken their own lives, it's not something that just goes away. We think in the moment, when someone's sitting there, my life has no value, I'm a burden to my friends, it would be easier for them if I wasn't here. It's just not true. It seems like it in the moment, and it's 100% real in the moment. You see the stress that we're under, we feel like we're causing other people, and it seems like the only logical solution, but it's not, Everyone in their life will be impacted for the rest of their life from that.
Yeah.
And so taking the time to ask for help when you're struggling, taking the time to let people serve and not feel like a burden. Because literally the first thing on my mind before I called it is like, I don't want to be a burden. He's got enough on his plate. He's got X, Y, and Z. But I still made the call and still have a friend who was able to show up, And again, if they don't answer, call somebody else and work through and continue to push on, because there's so much value and so much worth that we can still offer people. And every time I've shared my story of struggling with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, someone has come up to afterwards, sometimes right away, sometimes months, years later, and been like, it really helped me. It really helped me to know that I wasn't the only one going through this. So taking our experience and using it again to lift and bless other people.
And the flip side of that, just briefly, is my own personal struggles were so much improved, so much, like I mentioned this weekend, how healing this has been for myself.
Right.
To be able to take a break from the busyness and say, I'm going to step in and help a friend. And there's always do we have time? Do we not? And there's going to be the right times and the wrong times to be able to do that. But this weekend was a good one.
Right.
And serving somebody else, reaching out, is therapeutic as well. Can be very much 100%. So to you, with your own personal struggles.
As a team, we can do more,
Yes.
When we work, say this was a church today. Someone was talking about like hay, and they're trying to bring in the hay before it rains.
Right.
And they would get all the farmers and go to one place, get it done much quicker, and then go to the next. It's like, well, logically you think, well, if they just all worked on their own farms, they'd get it done. But it's like, no, it's not how it works.
Yeah. When
you're working as a team, you're working more efficiently. You're able to lift more because you're doing it as a team, and you get more done. And it's the same with this. Like as we lift and help other people, it's not taking away from the mountain of problems we may be feeling. It actually makes the mountain a little lower, because then we have people supporting us on that end too.
And it's probably because of the social connection, to pull it all the way back to the very beginning of it, that we're cultivating.
Absolutely.
And when that is stronger, it's better. Yeah, we laughed that, the best good we did on our missions was connect as friends 21 years ago.
Yes.
And it's been so good for both of us.
And it's not been one of those friendships where everything's always sunshine and roses.
Agreed.
There's been times where I'm like, what is this idiot thinking?
Exactly.
And I'm sure
if Jeremy just saw it this way, things would be better.
Yes.
And there's that time to just be like, I'm going to sit in the moment, even though I disagree with, the the irrational thoughts or whatever. And I'm sure it's been the other way.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, disagreeing in every aspect of it, but still not saying we disagree with, therefore we cannot be friends.
Agreed.
Which happens way too often. Allowing that imperfect people into our lives.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes they're going to say something we disagree with. Yes, sometimes they're going to hurt us.
Right.
They're going to hurt our feelings. They're going to have too much on their plate and brush us off and not be important, not make us feel important, but they still love and care about us. That's the baseline, and we can still love and care about them and have that,
Yeah, agreed.
So thank you again for being on here.
You're
always
welcome.
a pleasure to chat with Dr. Merrell here. Thanks for joining the podcast. Like he said, QPR is a great resource. 988. There's plenty of resources on the internet if you're struggling, you're overwhelmed. Don't get all your medical advice from podcasts and TikToks, of course.
Agreed.
There's so many great resources. Like Psychology Today was another one we mentioned. Looking for therapists, people to help. If you're struggling, you're overwhelmed, please, please, please look for resources to be helped. If you're someone who's, loves someone, cares about someone who's struggling, overwhelmed, don't be afraid to reach out. You will never know how big of an impact something little that you do will have on their life. So
last thing I'll say,
absolutely.
I like to share with folks when I'm working with them and they're struggling with suicide, how important they are to me, even if it's the first time I've met them, because I don't know if they're going to be the individual who connects with my son or daughter or other son. And that's a true thing to express. So I say, hold on, I don't know if you're going to be the soccer coach or the high school teacher or the neighbor who my kids connect with and think that's who helped get me through. So please hold on if that's your personal struggle, because I might need you just like I need Jeremy in 10, 20, 40 years.
Yep. Or someone I love and care about, that love that it's not always a one-to-one exchange.
Right.
I do this for someone, they do that for me. That's not how community works.
Right.
I help you, you help this person, and it comes back and we all end up getting the support we need. We all have different skills and characteristics and abilities. So yeah, it's a really great way to end the podcast. So
thank you.
Thanks again for joining the Empowerful Health podcast. Check out our other episodes and we'll see you soon.